The Unquiet Day is a strange one for me. It's the one story from Chris Eccleston's run that I can't really remember anything about. Maybe it's because it's the one episode I missed when they were originally aired, and I only finally watched it about a year later when my dad got the box set. I'm not sure. On paper this should be brilliant. It's Mark Gatiss of League of Gentlemen and Sherlock fame, writing a Victorian ghost story with sci-fi elements. I love Mark, he's a terrific actor and I know he could be a good writer. Plus he's a massive Doctor Who fan, writing books for the new adventures, as well as writing Probe and being a part of Big Finish, even helping some celebratory sketches that were done for Doctor Who Night in 1999. He'd then go on to write more episodes for Doctor Who, as well as Adventure in Space and Time, which is seriously excellent. All this really shows his love and passion for the series. It has the basis of being a really strong episode. Plus, it has Simon Callow playing Charles Dickens, a part he seems to revel in, hamming it up, but in a fun way. But outside of that, before rewatching it for the purpose of this review, I struggle to think about details of the story, which I know is sacrilege to the die-hard Doctor Who fans. So the Doctor takes Rose to Victorian Wales on Christmas Eve, complete with period dress for Rose. Definitely something Doctor Who needs to do more of. But corpses seem to be walking around as if they are possessed. Nice and creepy so far. Plus, Charles Dickens is here, hitching along for the ride after a reading of A Christmas Carol gets interrupted by one of said corpses. This really does have all the makings of a perfect Christmas special if you ask me. I'm not the biggest fan of horror, but there is something about ghost stories with great atmosphere that I'm always drawn to. You can tell throughout the story that Mark Gatiss is a big fan of classic Hammer horror, which is not a bad thing at all, and it really does add to the enjoyment of the episode. The main thing I would say about his writing is that his tone is all over the place, especially with the character of the Undertaker, Mr. Sneed. At the beginning of the episode, when the first corpse rises, it's "oh no, not again," kind of like a farce. But only about 5 minutes later he's being extremely sinister with Gwyneth, as if he is the villain behind all the action. Both tones are fine, but the flip-flopping between the two can sometimes be a bit jarring. Though the darkly comic tone is a Gatiss staple, which again I am all for. It's also great to see Eccleston really enjoying himself. The exchanges between him and Dickens are joyous to watch. It seems that he's really settling into the part. This episode sees the Doctor both his most human and his most alien. It's a credit to both Christopher and Mark for their skills to be able to show both these assets of the character. These aforementioned scenes with Dickens show his humanity, but later in the episode when they get to talking about different moralities between species, this really shows how alien the character is. The question that arises is, should someone else inhabit a dead body? As the Doctor puts it, then this is no different to somebody having an organ after you die. It's an interesting ethical dilemma that they don't get too much deeper into, but it does raise some questions for the viewer to mull over at home. The design for the walking corpses is great, a really unsettling look when you first see it, combined with a brilliant final shot before the titles of the woman walking towards the camera while screaming. I can see it's been the first time that children were really scared when watching the new series of Doctor Who. It turns out these corpses have been inhabited by creatures called the Gelf. Again, another Red Dwarf reference. I think this is telling me I need to rewatch all the Red Dwarf again as well. Who have been using the gas in the house to travel from body to body. Again, a great horror idea of using something so mundane to make it scary and then unsettling. We also get another reference to the Time Warp, with these Gelf being refugees after their homeworld had been destroyed. They play on the Doctor's own guilt to try and get their way. I love this idea of exploiting the weakness of the Doctor. His perpetual need to help people will now potentially doom the planet. Again, this isn't played on too much, but it is another interesting element to see. Side note / nitpick. As we're in the midst of the final confrontation against the Gelf, Rose says that she can't die, as she hasn't been born yet. I've never understood people in time travel scenarios who say this. Of course you can die. You may be in the past right now, but you're in your own personal future. You're still aging, you're still being affected by time. If you spent 365 days in the TARDIS, never spending more than a day in the same place, after 365 days you would still be 1 year older. By the same logic of not being able to die as you haven't been born yet, you therefore can't go into the future because you would have been dead by then. It's like saying you can't die in Manchester because you're from London and you've never been around the M25 before. Maybe it's because I was raised on sci-fi, but it always bugs me when characters say something like this. Does that make sense? Nitpick end. So, is this episode worth rewatching? Before this I would have said no, as I couldn't really remember it, so it obviously doesn't affect the overall plot too much. After rewatching it, well, yes, there is no great impact on the overall story arc for the series. It is a great atmospheric piece that shows of how good all the actors are, with great writing and great direction to support them. Plus, it's always good to see Eve Miles. Love Torchwood. I'm not reviewing Torchwood.